Hi, my name is Bob Martin. I'm the executive director of the Presidio Theatre. Welcome back to another one of our Dreams from the Presidio Theatre. I am so happy to have what I feel like I can call an old friend and somebody whose work I have admired and watched grown and leaped from when I first knew her 20 years ago in Santa Fe at the Lenzig Performing Arts Center, and to now, where she'll be joining us both in this coming up September, October, and then again the year following with the full project, Rulan Tangen from Dancing Earth. It's so wonderful to have you, my dear. So wonderful.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I just want to give acknowledgement to the Presidio being on the original homelands of Ramaytush Ohlone people. And I've been blessed by being welcomed in by not only Jonathan Cordero on behalf of Dancing Earth, but directly through the Sayers family, who are Mutsun Ohlone from Indian Canyon. So that was actually the very first performance of Dancing Earth was at the Dance Mission. Gosh, it must have been 16 years ago.
We're going to talk about dreams, but first I am going to talk to you about the soul of San Francisco because you've lived it and your family's lived it, and I want you to tell us a little bit about that.
I, I dreamed of being a dancer and didn't have the capacity to have dance classes, but I was in middle school at Aptos Junior High and I was reading books. I was going to the library, I was reading books. I think what happened is I was listening to probably the public radio station and overheard Ravel's Bolero and Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. And I
Mhm.
had a transcendent experience where I literally could feel myself dancing like a professional dancer, even though I had never had that visceral experience. And before that, I was more of someone who liked to draw, write,
Mhm.
and read. And my body was like hunched over. I had big, thick glasses. I was so stiff that my knees were actually bent in shape. So I was not one of those like born to dance people, but I had this
Mhm.
obsession in my mind. And my grandfather actually was the working mechanic at the hobby shop at the Presidio. And somehow I was living in the house of my grandma and grandpa, and they said, oh, there's a ballet school that's there on the base. And so I ended up being able to be accepted into ballet classes with Madame Elena Shevtsova-Pirnik. And the funny thing about the Presidio Theater is you could take a rock and you could throw it up the road and it would hit the Kwanzaa hut, which was my
Mhm.
very first
Mhm.
dance class. And, as I said, I wasn't that talented, but I had this fire in my eye. And she saw that wonderful Polish Russian ballerina, she saw that and she gave me opportunities. She saw that I worked hard, and that is the beginning of what has become my life. So there's my grandpa's mechanic shop, which is now closed, but you could throw a rock in that direction from the theater, and it would be there. And then the Kwanzaa hut near the one of the old bowling alleys. And so I have these very early memories of dreaming about dance from right there in the Presidio. And I will also say that my beloved grandmother and grandfather are actually buried in the Presidio Cemetery at the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge. So I often have that iconography with me to remind me, sort of like ancestral spirits there.
I love that. I love that. And when you think about the two cities, they're the two cities of St. Francis. So it sort of makes sense that there's this San Francisco, Santa Fe relationship.
San
But let
Francisco de Santa Fe. That's right. That's the full
yeah,
name.
yeah.
Santa Fe. Yeah.
It's crazy. Um, Tell me, and you started about dreams, but tell me, and especially because of the work that you've done and the nature of it. And again, as I say, the way that you've just grown and emerged, as far as I'm concerned, both as an artist and a company. What are your dreams? What do you see happening? What do you want to flourish into once we get on the other side of this pandemic?
Well, it's interesting because I think I sat in front of you with my one of my first dreams, which was to give birth to an Indigenous contemporary dance company. And now here we have Dancing Earth, and we had been really, I'll just give a little bit of the history of it, which is people didn't even know what Indigenous contemporary dance was when we were first bringing it out. It was existing in little pockets. I had probably dreamed about it in the late 80s of creating this genre of dance, this expression of culture that I hadn't seen existing. And it took me that long from the late 80s till the early 2000s for people to see my work working with youth, teaching, where they're like, you know what, you should go ahead and do that crazy stuff you want to do because it might make the help keep the youth interested in culture, and might help the other people, the people who don't know about Native people, understand us more, understand more of the good of the culture. So I launched into that with Dancing Earth, and about 2 years into that is when different elders, including Anishinaabe grandmothers and Lakota grandmothers, who I met at a conference for the Native Wellness Institute, they said, we want you to that you young artists are the warriors of today, so you can make your dances about the themes that are important to us at this time. And one of those themes is water. So this launched us into a journey that continues till now of work that is guided by Native elders and culture carriers, and brings in different tribal perspectives. So it's not one story from one tribal perspective, but just as our company is internationally indigenous, our advisors are also coming from different cultural perspectives, but they tend to come into common around themes like water, or lands and original foods, land stewardship, treaties. That was a work I did actually in California, looking at or listening to the first Indigenous Women's Treaty defending Mother Earth, because one of the authors actually lives in the East Bay. That's Penny Opal Plant. And that really brought me into relationship with what does it mean to be an artist with long roots in California? Because even though I had my powwow dance, which comes from the Plains culture, it's actually not relevant to California natives. And in fact, one of the things they say is all of these Native people were relocated to San Francisco and they brought their powwow and all of their ways, but that's not what we do here originally. So like any visitors to a place, to stop and understand what are the ways of the people here. And so I have been more conscious about not just inviting people to collaborate, but in the case of particularly with Northern California, because of my family's long ties there, is to find out more about cultural viewpoints from people in the area.
And let me ask you, because your new piece was going to be at the Presidio Theatre in October, and now we have postponed it for a year. Just so everybody gets a little bit of a preview of it, tell me the basis of the performance and what we're going to be able to see in October of 2021.
Well, so that's in October 2021. What we're going to do is we'll precede that with October 2020 by paying tribute to the local California Native people, because that's how we always do things. We don't just land and do our thing, we're always in relationship. So, in a way, we plant the seed by activating this space, the outdoor space of the Presidio, the native lands that have always been native lands, by inviting in representatives of California natives and native people who have relocated to the Bay, but represent tribes from different places. So I feel really proud of those long-term relationships and the ability to acknowledge the people who have always been singing and dancing these particular lands into renewal since the beginning of time. So we put that forward first as an offering, a humble offering to say, this is who we are centering, and then we come next with our offering, which is about us taking responsibility as modern day global indigenous peoples and creating the new ceremonies, the new rituals that speak to the issues of our time. And I've noticed with Dancing Earth that the visions that come in, either through elders or through our artists when we're in collaboration, they tend to be a little bit ahead of time, such as, that's what visions are. So for example, we had done a water piece at the Lensic Theater in Santa Fe a number of years back, and many people now see that as a pre-visioning for certain scenes that happen at Standing Rock. So for the 2021 performance, we had been making a show through 2019 and early 2020 that was about Indigenous futurities. And we had basically imagined up this scenario of young Indigenous people basically running from the apocalypse. with just a backpack on their back. And then having to consider, okay, what's the knowledge from the ancestors that can guide this way, guide our way through. And that they were told, well, you have to look into your medicine bundle. And they like, well, what's a medicine bundle? And one of them says, oh, it's in your backpack. And then they dig out of their backpack like trash or rocks or emptiness. And that these become the teachings that they have to dive into and understand the depth of in order to remake the world. And a lot of this can feel very familiar now, although we had premiered it before the virus and the shelter in place. It's really about how we face the really the discontinuation of the system, the crumbling. And for many people, that system was, you know, dense with inequity, with attempted genocide. You can think of both the virus and the violence against people of color as being really in place since colonization. So this is a chance to really reimagine the world. And this idea of digging into whatever we have to understand what we have going forward, that came out of a collective uh, centering of like how do we what makes us out of balance and what brings us into balance. And ultimately what it kept coming down to was this connection with all forms of life, connection which leads to respect and reciprocity, relationship and responsibility. But first has to be that connection. And so we were, you know, we found ourselves, we could connect to the trees, we could connect to the rocks. I mean, we're dancing earth, we could do that. But yeah, but one day, one of the things that we were improvising about, we dug in, it was a piece of trash. I'm like, oh, great. So I thought everyone would be like, oh, trash bad, plastic bad, rocks and trees good. I just had this binary in my head. But what we found was the poems that we were writing, they sound as indigenous as anything else that we were creating. For example, there was like an old red rubber bouncing ball. And so the poem that came out to that, one of the lines that I can remember is, we are the color of your blood. When you push us down, we bounce back, which sounds like it could be written about any First Nation. And so that was a very profound awakening for me about not not making a prejudgment. If the intention is to connect with all forms of life, then the connection is with all forms of life. And so these sort of unanticipated awakenings and little revelations were part of our process, and really representing the whole second act of the piece represents a dreaming and embodying a reimagining of the future. And I feel like that's a continual process. I know in the presenting world, the typical thing is, what's the show? Okay, that's what we're booking. You come and do that. But I am interested in something that's more mobile, more responsive, could shift and change with the season, with the circumstances, with the people in the room. And I'm so interested to see how that'll manifest in that year, in that following fall, that harvest season, which is one of the most beautiful times for the Bay Area.
The timing could not be more perfect in an unperfect world, because I feel like what you're doing is such a response to the moment that we're in. And I just want to say that I look forward so much to seeing the completed piece, to seeing it in person, to seeing it with a full audience, to be able to, a year later, celebrate life. And I just want to thank you, Rulan, so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's just been such a delight.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I'm looking forward to it myself. And I mean, all of these images that are up on my wall, we're going to be activating, animating, going to be all up inside of it when that fall comes. So looking forward to it. Thank you
You
so
too.
much.
Okay. Be well.